Good evening. Welcome to Politically Incorrect. Let me tell you who's with us today. Dave Foley, one of my favorite guests over the years, made one more appearance for me. This is his new DVD, Kids in the Hall, Same Guys, New Dresses. Love that. Governor Gary Johnson, my favorite governor. I'll tell you why in a minute. He is an Ironman, mountain climber, governor of New Mexico. Thank you for coming back with us, sir.
Thanks.
Jane Chastain, always a good guest for us, co-host of the Judicial Watch Report on the USA Radio Network and a columnist for WorldNetDaily.com. And Gene Simmons, as if I have to tell you, is the #1 gold record champion as the frontman for KISS. And his new magazine, which I am featured in right next to a condom ad, called Gene Simmons' Tongue, on the stands now. Give a hand to our panel. Okay. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, the governor is pretty much my favorite governor because he is pretty much also the only politician in America that I know of who's had the guts to say that our drug war really needs a serious rethinking, and especially... I never understand that. You say things like that, people applaud, but somehow when they get in the voting booth, you know, it just doesn't work that way.
Actually, I think the people are ahead of the politicians on this one.
But why don't they vote
the way they applaud? From weed.
What?
They're a little disoriented from the weed. There's an awful lot of... Well, I think I voted, man. I don't know.
I'm at a disadvantage. What is the consensus? You guys seem to understand each other. Yes, the governor votes my... What is your way? What is that thing? Because I have a feeling I have a comment to make. Well, in other words, the people are ahead of the government. What does that mean?
Well, that drugs should be considered a health problem rather than a criminal justice problem, that we need to stop arresting 1.6 million people a year.
I don't agree.
You don't agree?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
You think we should continue to arrest people on drugs?
I'll tell you what I think we should do. As king of the world, here's what I would do. I would set up sections in town, in New York, Los Angeles, and so on, that are legal to do whatever the hell you want to do to yourself. You want to shoot up heroin? Legal. Smoke cigarette, do everything. In point of fact, right now, we are punishing people who want to smoke cigarettes. You can't do it in the building because it's all this stuff. If you get caught drunk driving, you get, punishment. As king of the world, if you're caught drunk driving and you bang into somebody, even if you don't kill them, death.
Gene, well, you know what?
No, but wait. Maybe we don't disagree at all.
Yeah.
In that do drugs and do harm to somebody else.
Right.
That ought to be punishable.
But I want to do one thing.
And drive, that ought to be punishable.
All right, but you're forgetting one thing.
No, I think we're forgetting the most important thing here.
Out of the bottle on tobacco and alcohol. They have huge companies that lobby
because they're legal, which means they can afford people to go to Washington and make campaign contributions.
You can never put those two back.
But what you're really talking 80 million Americans have done illegal drugs. I mean, you've got to realize that it's out of the bottle already.
All right, but you say 80 million Americans have done illegal drugs, and you're right about that, but what you're forgetting is in this past month, according to the household survey on substances, over 100 million people have used alcohol, around 40 million people have used tobacco, and something like 14 million people have used drugs. That's 6% of the population.
I see. So we live in a country where if you do something that only 6% of the people do, you go to jail. That's really the idea of America,
The idea that we've lost the drug war, so we ought to just give up.
You know what? First of all, when people answer surveys about the drugs they do, sometimes they lie. Are you doing cocaine right now? Yes, come over, you got me.
Yeah.
How stupid is that?
The government... The government says that drug use has been cut in half over the last 20 years, and that's absolutely false. They say that drug use has dropped from 24 million users down to 12 million users. Well, listen, we're arresting 1.6 million people a year. I refuse to believe that we are arresting 1 out of every drug user in this country. And does that mean that as we proceed to hundreds of users of drugs in this country that we're going to arrest 18 million people a year? I'm going to live to see 80 million people arrested in this country.
Hey, let me ask you one thing.
Shouldn't Bush be helping support the drug industry then?
No.
We're
just asking for consistency. What do you think is more deleterious to your health? Marijuana or McDonald's?
Well, let me tell you one thing, Bill.
Seriously.
No one has had to be protected from someone who was high on a hamburger.
No one.
That's not.
But that's where.
And has anyone had to be protected from someone who was high on pot?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I was in my college dorm. My roommate, who I thought was straight, jumped on me in the middle of the night. The guy was clearly on something. Yeah. It wasn't a cigarette. And by the way,
so you don't know what he was on.
Marijuana.
And I think no, it's very clear that because later on I thought it was because of my magnanimous personality, but I found out he was the weed dealer in school much later on.
So you're basing our drug policy in America on the fact that in college somebody tried to lick you at night.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Is this?
I am.
You're not likely to be made king of the world, are you?
yes, Governor Johnson, please add some intelligence to this
Look, the bottom line drug strategy ought to be reducing death, disease, and crime. The bottom line ought to be putting more resources into education. The bottom line ought to be giving treatment to people that need treatment. I would maintain that 90% of the drug problem today is prohibition-related, not use-related, and that is not to discount the problems with use. But that's what we ought to be concentrating on, are the problems with use.
An addict will not come in voluntarily for treatment. There are only two reasons that an addict will come in for treatment. A drug addict, a hardcore drug addict, will not. There are only two ways. One, if they're incarcerated and therefore forced to get the treatment, or number two, their health deteriorates to the point that they can't use the drugs
let me talk about a harm
anymore,
reduction.
and then they get the treatment only till they're rehabilitated to the point they can start using again.
Harm reduction strategy, Zurich, Switzerland. In Zurich, Switzerland, if you're a heroin addict, you can get free heroin. You have to go to a doctor. You have to go to a doctor. You have to get a prescription. The idea was death, disease, and crime would decrease in Zurich, Switzerland. Free heroin, no more overdose, no more hepatitis C because the needles were clean. No more HIV, no more hepatitis C, no more crime involved to have to steal the product. The idea, death, disease, crime, plummet. I talked to the chief of police from Zurich, Switzerland a couple of years ago. He's in Albuquerque. He said, I was in law enforcement. We knew that death, disease, and crime was going to skyrocket when they did this in Zurich. He said, I'm here today to tell you that death, disease, and crime has plummeted in Zurich, Switzerland as a result of this heroin maintenance program. The point is, looking at it from a health standpoint rather than a criminal justice standpoint, and that needs to be the basic shift.
But that was my point.
No, that's why I don't think we disagree.
I think there's got to be a section in town where, whether it's the hospital, this is where you get high.
This reminds me of the college campus that wanted a free speech zone. I thought we lived in a free speech zone called America.
It's not the same thing. No, it's not. If you're high, you don't even know what you're saying.
Also, there's a corollary to that.
Well, you don't know what you're saying, and you're not high.
The reason the Swiss people accepted that is that they were told that this would somehow find a way to take all of these heroin addicts, and they would figure out a way that if they regularly had their heroin and they didn't have to run out and get it and worry about how they were going to get the next hit, that they would somehow be returned to society.
Can we stop lumping heroin in?
Not in all cases, but again, if we're out to kill heroin addicts, we've got the perfect strategy right now, which is basically you don't know what the product is, so we got people shooting up with dirty needles, we got HIV, we got hepatitis C, we've got women involved in prostitution,
we're not out to kill heroin addicts, we're out to keep them from killing other people when they're out on the street.
That's what we should be doing, so that they don't have to rob.
What happened in Switzerland is they come in 4 times a day, they get their hit, they have never gotten regular jobs, it's been a big failure. So the American people want to have rooms here where people literally come in 4 times a day and they maintain heroin addicts.
But I think we may be saying the right thing. I don't want that person high in my house. Over there is good.
I don't want him in my house. This is not about saying okay to drugs.
Let the Swiss people maintain them.
Don't do drugs.
Okay, but please, my advertisers need a hit. We'll take a break. Poor Colorado, still on fire. Over 90,000 acres are burning out of control there. In fact, the smoke was so thick and widespread last night that even as far away as New Jersey, the Nets were choking. Yeah, President Bush met today with the Saudi foreign minister, Saud al-Faisal. As usual, they glossed over their differences and exchanged pleasantries. Bush called the Saudis an important ally, and al-Faisal named Bush Employee of the Month. Okay, fellas, please, let me interrupt this to start the show again. We were talking about drugs in America, but we really should broaden it out to be health in America. That is, I think, what we were trying to say, that it is drugs are a part of the health problem. But, you know, because they get all the heat, it's like the way the Arab countries have to focus on Israel. You're Israeli. Because otherwise they would have their people looking at them. They have to deflect from the real evil. Same thing with this country. The people who make poisons in America that are legal throw all the heat onto marijuana and the illegal drugs.
Relative evils. Relative. It's not... Look,
I
Bill,
ask again, McDonald's, way worse than marijuana for your health long term. I promise you.
Yes.
No one ever caused a traffic accident because they were high on hamburgers.
Shane, I think you're being naive.
Plus,
I think that I think when you look at sugar, you're talking to somebody here who hasn't had a drink in 15 years. I don't do drugs. I don't do sugar. But I got to tell you, these sweeteners that have been added to our food, the food additives, the food that we consume, definitely anxiety, the health consequence, the health costs added to what it is that we consume. Again, it's enormous. It is a gigantic problem in this country. The correlation between the big gulp and diabetes is enormous.
Absolutely.
We're not recognizing that there is a consequence to what it is that we're consuming.
And they just passed this $190 billion farm bill. This pork-laden, putrid substitute for real legislation that basically encourages people to grow corn. Why? Because corn people make a lot of campaign contributions. And they now used corn syrup. It's called high fructose corn syrup.
Well, it's in everything.
It's it replaced sugar, which is bad, but they used to use cane sugar. But this stuff is cheaper, and the corn lobby got this through. So that's, if you chart the rise of this stuff, it goes with the rise of obesity
Bill,
in America.
you notice it's quiet, but you notice it's quiet. Nobody's arguing with you. Nobody here is saying that sugar is good or that corn syrup and all that stuff is good for you. I'm not sure that's the issue. You're saying that drugs and McDonald's
food
are
is
the
a
same.
bigger poison than drugs in America by far. I'm saying the commercial with Kobe Bryant where a 3-year-old says, you know, if you help us win the championship, we get to go to McDonald's. You should have that commercial where he says, okay, we get to go and buy a pack of Marlboros.
Well, and with that,
it is the exact same thing.
Ridiculous. And
it is not ridiculous.
Without hitting McDonald's, there ought to be a component. There ought to be a component here of education to where McDonald's changes their diet. Which again, long term, we're going to see that. We're going to see the fast food.
They're offering salads.
We are. We're going to see that change.
Their salads are as high fat as their burgers.
Hey gang, let's go to McDonald's. Get a salad.
I got a low-fat dressing.
By the way, the camera's still on. King Whore over here. McDonald's, if you're interested in a commercial for the McGrill chicken, Gene Simmons is right here.
All right, but Bill, you are not for the government regulating the kind of food you eat. I mean, that would be ridiculous. That is not the government's job.
The idea that the government is looking out for you, the idea that the government is looking out for our health is preposterous.
All right, but there are
the EPA today.
All right,
if the government cared about health, there would be
one of the legitimate functions of a
insurance.
government in a democratic society is to protect you from enemies within and abroad, to protect you from being murdered. And you look at drugs, people who are high and have their brains altered in seriously damaging ways commit a high percentage of the traffic accidents.
Concentration.
All of that is alcohol. Almost all of that is alcohol.
Well, almost, because
the legal one.
So you want to unleash a whole. You want to unleash a whole new
You're not going to unleash anything new. You're just going to redirect law enforcement to actually enforce the laws of people doing harm to others. That ought to be a redirection.
You can't equate drug use with being a killer. You know, drug
What do you mean
users,
you
some
can't?
because
I
it's
can't.
because
Of
you
course you
can't.
can.
I can't.
Look at the traffic accidents. Look at the number of
instances, you
people
can.
driving
That's
alcohol.
alcohol.
I agree.
That's the
and-
legal
Wait a minute,
drug.
you're telling
And
me
drugs-
nobody causes an accident? You better look at the
But if you
accident
say
reports. It's been smoking
drug users
marijuana.
are not killers. Some drug users kill. Some people who don't do drugs kill.
But you're not defending
A
alcohol.
killer is a killer.
No, I'm not. I'm
So
just
what
saying
you wanna
that
do is-
genie is out of the bottle. I am saying
It's a specious argument. I mean, drugs do not make killers.
Gary is concerned about health, and I am too.
So am I.
450 million people.
Look at me.
450 million
I'm in
people.
horrible shape.
I'm not
I am
going.
very concerned
I
about
am
health.
not going there.
You know
I'm
what?
not likely to make it through this
450 million
show.
people a year. Hang on. Die of causes related to alcohol and
And how many
tobacco,
millions-
the two
yeah,
addictive
yeah,
substances
yeah,
that
that
we
are
have
legal.
legalized.
Well, but if there's...
Shocking. Only
Yeah.
10,000 people a year die from cocaine and heroin.
Well,
That's
that's because
shocking.
it's illegal.
No,
that's
it isn't.
because
No, it isn't. It's because
80%
of
the
prohibition.
population
It's
is
because
doing
they
it.
don't know what it is they're ingesting. Arguably, you could cut down on that number of deaths if they were taking prescribed doses, if they knew what they were taking. During prohibition of alcohol,
might
you had
say
people
a
that
few
died
heroin
from their
addicts.
consumption
Well,
of
we should
alcohol.
say some
If you went
heroin
blind,
addicts.
wood alcohol,
Heroin
bathtub
What is-
gin.
what are you
society
saying?
And letting them kill us.
What are you saying? That
He
when you
said
walk...
it at the beginning of the show.
But let
Treat
me
it
just-
like a medical problem
I
and not like
understand.
a criminal
But, okay,
justice problem.
I get it.
What do you mean, what are we saying?
It's very clear that everybody here is high, but when you go over to somebody's, if you come to my home, what do you expect? A dip, potato chips, and some crack?
I'm not going to serve that at my home. I'm not going to
Why
serve
not?
that at my...
Why not?
No, but
Because that is a lifestyle that I've
But
chosen.
if it's
Yeah.
legal, that's my question.
If
you
it's
see.
legal, look, I have been to people's houses where they serve Coke at the table, you know? It's not that unusual.
And by the way, the dip and the potato chips will kill you too. We'll
Yeah.
take a break. We'll be back.
By the way, off
All
camera,
right.
Bill
Wait.
told me that he was right, that I was right, and you know.
What?
Oh, you're not gonna. Oh,
No.
oh, now you're gonna pretend like you.
You know what? I was going to be nice.
You know what?
And now I'm
leaving.
going to say something.
You just-
You told me off camera. You said, I don't think anybody knows, but you've never had a drink, right? Or
That's not true.
or-
I've never been drunk in my life.
and you never did any drug.
No, except in a dentist chair.
Okay. Now, the other musician I can think of who says that, Ted Nugent. Now, I know you sold a lot of gold records, but, I mean, come on. Drugs help bands... Excuse me.
I'll tell you, you know what drugs help bands do? They help bands learn how to say, do you want fries with that correctly?
I don't know. If drugs have not hurt my
that is a
record
good
collection. If I had to pick
It hurt
records...
me.
if
I
had
had
to
two
pick,
guys in my band
I
that
know.
were from Mars.
But just from the music, if I had to pick records based on guys who took drugs or didn't take drugs, I'd take the ones who took drugs. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up about food is that, you know, the food industry and the drug industry, that's the legal drug industry in this country, are so in cahoots. We eat crappy food.
That's true.
What are the three biggest drugs in the country? They're all ones that help heartburn, cholesterol, or farting, basically.
Caffeine, alcohol,
So,
tobacco.
Right. So, in other words, you eat crappy food, get back to work, have some coffee, which is horrible for you, caffeine, more acid in your stomach, so you can get back to work. And then, if your stomach really explodes, I saw this ad for, I wrote this down, it says, Lipitor. It's a cholesterol-lowering drug. It said, when diet or exercise fail, Lipitor can help. So in other words, it's not you, it's the diet that fails. It doesn't say when you can't diet or exercise, it says when diet or exercise fails.
Side effects? Did you hear the side effects?
Of what?
Of Lipitor.
No.
It has nothing to do with lips, I'll tell you that.
Very damaging. Very damaging.
Well, they say, so this is not, there's no slander, don't start to sue me, but Lipitor's enormous side effects. Fatigue, low blood pressure, all that stuff.
That's just like
All
we were
I know
talking
is that
earlier
nobody
about
in America...
So many things. So many things.
true.
So many things.
Again, the spotlight is on the drugs, so the real health problem goes unheralded. Nobody talks about that. Why don't you eat correctly instead of eating the crap that you eat?
But it doesn't have to be either or. There's bad food, everybody's hurting themselves. Alcohol and tobacco is legal. You're stupid if you use either one, but it's your life. My only point is...
You just said put them in separate camps or
no, I'm
zones
trying to help
or
you
something.
guys get high, shoot up in your eyeballs, whatever you want to do. I just don't want you on my streets because I'm the king of the world.
We're not coming. We'll take a break. All right, there's Gene's new magazine called Gene Simmons' Tongue. I'm featured in it. There I am wearing a T-shirt that says "Rehab is for quitters."